Today we're lucky enough to feature Rain Wright, who is going to be reading from her new book, The Language of Mothers. I always wonder, I've read the description of it, so I'm never sure what exactly to call it when I'm like, it's not a novel, it's not nonfiction exactly, it's nonfiction so it's a really interesting kind of piece of pure creation based on real events. So, and I'm sure she'll give a better definition when she comes up here. But I thought it was exciting when I saw she was publishing it, and I was like, hey, we should have her come out, especially because she is one of our own. She does teach here on campus. I highly recommend her classes as well if you haven't had the opportunity. This is our last event for this semester. I try to avoid doing one in May. I don't think anyone wants an event during finals week, but if you want one, let me know. If you want to stay connected, I do have a Instagram page for the series called Mostly Monthly. So if you look up Mostly Monthly on Instagram, that is our event page. And we will be continuing to have events in the fall. Tentatively thinking 3 events for both fall and spring of next year. So there'll be quite a few more of these events, and I'm going to keep putting them on until people stop coming, so probably forever. I also want to give a shout out to Costco for selling me nice things to give you guys. Just a reminder, you do have to be here when we do the prize drawing if you want to win the prizes. You can't leave early and still win. So stay to the end. All right, without any further ado, I'd like to bring up Rain and have a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. Just let me pull my notes up. Okay, so I want to thank Andy, and I want to thank the librarians in this wonderful, warm space that we're in. It feels kind of generative to be here and see all your faces and be able to speak to you about the language of mothers. So the language of mother is hybrid creative nonfiction. It has poetry and it has creative nonfiction. And what they are doing is they're speaking to each other. The other people I want to thank are my mothers, my grandmothers, and my daughters. So I thought I would begin by reading for my daughters. And if you have the book, this is on page 167. I place sounds on my tongue, the words of leaving this time. My daughters' faces are the living rivers in my bed, and I forget the path of light rain down the mountains out my window. I am amniotic waters, a current between our bodies. So this piece came about, it really is an ongoing conversation between my mother, between my daughters, about what it means to heal. So these stories are an archive. They are a language between us, but now they are out in the world. So hopefully they're a language to other women who need these stories. So I'm going to tell you a little bit what they're about. They do navigate trauma. So this book is about escaping domestic abuse from my biological father. This book is about escaping domestic abuse from my children's father. This book is about my eldest daughter's attempted suicide 3 times. This book is about my youngest daughter's anorexia. And this book is about my middle daughter being caught between these 2 really big stories. So when I thought about what I wanted to write, I asked permission from them. Because when you write about yourself, it's relational. And my daughters are supportive. They wanted me to produce these stories. And another thing that kind of struck me was this idea of epigenetics. So there's this thing at the end of DNA that can fray when you have trauma. And I wondered, what did I pass to my daughters? What did I pass to them in utero? But not only are these stories about voicing mental health awareness, not only are they about voicing escaping domestic violence, but they are about the places of healing. Because I'm not hiding mental illness, I'm bringing it into the light. And I'm not hiding that I was a victim of domestic abuse. And I use that word victim very purposefully, right? Some people say, you can't play the victim. But that's what I was. That's what my mother was. And I don't think there's any shame in that. And there's something kind of powerful in the idea of being able to tell your stories from your perspective, right? And these are my stories. So why do I mix poetry and why do I mix prose? Well, that's very purposeful too. They're speaking to each other. So there's also this idea that a lot of women don't escape domestic violence. So what the poetry and prose are doing is they're pushing language forward, and they're interacting with each other. And through my writing, I'm building the life of my mother for my daughters, because my mother passed away when I was in my 20s. So I'm reclaiming her story as an archive for my daughters and for successive generations. So these are our stories. And the artwork in this is my mother's artwork. So again, when I say that the language of mothers is a conversation between me and my mother, me and my daughters, me and my grandmothers, I'm finding power in that center, and I'm finding power in art, and saying that art can heal, writing can heal. And my mother found her healing path through painting. She painted on silk, and I find mine in writing. I'm also very interested in this idea of the body, writing from the body. Because often we hear, that kind of Cartesian, I think, therefore I am. But what I'm interested in is what's trapped in my body and what reading and writing can release. And I think that's kind of a powerful movement. So writing then is a form of breaking imposed silence that many women feel. Writing is my mother's stories. My mother was my storyteller, and I'm my daughter's storyteller. And again, I'm calling on my ancestral women, these women of my bones, and saying to heal me, heal my daughter, heal our families. So I write to overturn silence. And I hope maybe you find something like writing or art to overturn whatever silences that you have. So let's read a little. So the other thing that happened when I set out to write this is I kind of asked out loud, and I was living in Kaneohe at the time, how do I raise strong daughters? And that night when I went to sleep, the ko'olau came into my dreams, and they said, we are the grandmothers, and you lay your body bare, and that's where the strength is. There's power in your body. So I thought, well, that sounds quite poetic, and let's write a poem about it. So that's what I'll read next. And it's called Birth Water. Okay, so birth water. The mountains are a lung, an expanded crevice of exhaled and inhaled water, sung valleys in ridged winds. Their bones center stones with rib cages, fastened in threaded knots by heliosite hands. They are women, woven women, vine and flower limbs. The mountains are a fruit, lucid skin, seed blood heart, flesh a mantle, olivine rich. Descend through rivered thighs, flesh in blood dirt, boned leaves, branches. Trace the pine, and in the turn, the mountain language, recited between gored wind, in its bare-breasted and waterful, it is descended a song. The grandmothers are the glass stone mountains. They are low-toned voice, rupturing from water births. In grandmother mountain's call of refrain, we lay our bodies bare. Our bodies, our bodies. We lay them bare, open to the sky. Open our legs as water-carved valleys. Our bodies open as water knife spines. So again, it was kind of interesting thinking about what I was going to talk about. And I went through my notes that I had from when I was writing this, and I found some pretty cool ones. And one was the microbial reaction of yeast and bacteria, because I was really interested in how the world around me functions too. And I am from Honanao on the Big Island, and there's a lot of coffee farms there. So another thing that this book is doing is it's honoring place. So I honor Honanao, I honor Miloli'i where I live, I honor Kaneohe and Kaimuki, because places are storied. And these places are storied with me and my daughters, like ghosts through these places, these different versions of us at all different ages. And when I think about Honao now, I think about the fermented smell of coffee beans. I think about the small shack I lived in with my eldest daughter, and how the roof would roll off and they would lay the coffee beans out. And I wanted to know about the bacteria and about the sugar breakdown that happened, this complexity, this kind of movement of these beans that I was smelling. So I think that I bring this up because if there are any writers in the audience, what I want to remind you is to be curious. So there's these moments when you're writing about things, and maybe you wonder, like, how does the coffee bean create that kind of beautiful, pungent smell? Then you can look it up, and it can become a poem, become part of your narrative. Because again, we're honoring the land by telling these stories too, right? So the other thing that this book does, as I said, is it is a hybrid of poetry and prose. And it's fragmented. A lot of the language is fragmented, and it's purposely fragmented, and it's not necessarily linear, because again, there are moments as a mother when I was afraid that I would never escape domestic abuse, that kind of static moment, that women do not escape. So I wanted my language in the book to kind of mimic that those moments where it feels like you're fragmented, but you can escape. So the poetry and the prose are kind of doing that. And the book, not being in chronological order, is doing that too, because time doesn't feel linear when you're trying to escape these really difficult situations, right? Because we have memory. And when I'm writing this, I'm thinking about memory. And I'm thinking about how I can put kindness and care and love back to these different versions of myself. This self that said, why didn't I get my daughters out of this situation sooner? How do I help my daughters heal? So these are the things that I thought about as I wrote. And my mother was the center. And I lost her when I was in my 20s. But I had my daughter, my eldest daughter, when I was in high school. And one thing she said was, I know it's kind of selfish, but I am grateful for my granddaughter. And I am grateful for my daughters. So again, what I'm doing with this book is I am mapping memory. I am mapping the body. I am mapping my mother's childhood in Dronfield, England. Her journey from England to California to Hawaii to escape abuse. And then my journey from Big Island here to escape abuse. And I'm also thinking about touch. My mother learned Lomi Lomi massage from Auntie Margaret Machado on the Big Island. And I'm thinking about the language of the land, right? So you will notice that there, if you read the book, that there's also Olelo Hawaii woven in here, because that is the language that the land knows here, right? So I'm going to read a little bit longer piece. And the other thing that played a big part in this, as I mentioned, is the idea of dreams. And I feel like my mother still communicates through dreams. And this one's called Flute Music. And although my mother passed away a long time ago, sometimes she wakes me up. So my mother wakes me with flute music song, held in her silver-tipped keys. She tells my femurs curled against my warm sleep and sacral vertebrae bent to her voice about the notes she played. She shakes these bones gently, a recognition of song that held the holes her fingers pressed. Each pitch and duration a breath and fingertip of pressure, and I listen to the tonal longing winds through pined at Wahila and back to childhood in Honaunau, shifting with memory. I've forgotten her flute, but she reminds me. I don't know where your flute is, Mom. I don't. I say to a voice caught with sleep. I don't know where she got the flute, the case, black and blue velvet lining. Sat in our house in Honaunau throughout childhood, along with Dad, my stepdad, always Dad's, upright deep double bass with its deep string tones, along with the piano that Connie's son, a childhood friend, over Facebook tells me is now, or perhaps still, up at his parents' house. Was this piano a sold item? Dad's bass was sold for food, for electricity, for need. I don't remember which or when, but in childhood, it sat with various other instruments that were at one time or another sold in need. Instruments that at one time or another could and were picked up and plucked and shaken by every passing child's hand. The flute case had come with a smell as my mother, had the same smell as my mother's black leather purse, the one she carried in our escape from my father, Damon, from California to Hawaii. My mother sketched a pen and ink drawing of her flute and my stepfather, my dad. In the rough pen lines, he is shirtless and filled with brass wind breaths, eyes closed and lower lip in embouchure, his mouth the place of ocean salt and fresh river water, a song valley playing. His arms and hands hold the flute with long finger delicacy. I want to say his hands hold the flute with reverence in this sketch. What song did he play in the sketch? Did my mother carry the flute from California? I can't find her sketch, but in her papers, I find the photo she drew, creating image of Dad. Where is my flute, she says again. I don't know, Mom, I will ask. Over the phone, my siblings call her Mum. Mum, they call her, as an almost breath of sound, reflecting her Englishness. They remember the flute. Wow, Mum's flute, they say. Mum's flute. Perhaps they see her when they say her name, a flash of hair and hands. See her holding the flute against her mouth with a smile before an exhaled breath, pressing the keys with tapered fingers. She played with her eyes half closed. She played in thin notes, notes reaching for sound. I don't know if my mother played well. I know that sometimes she'd enter a room singing. I don't want to set the room on fire, she would sing. What song is this? I know she'd laugh at her own lost keys, slightly always off key. Lizzie, slightly off key, she'd say. But she'd sing. She was the only one who used the name Lizzie. She was Elizabeth, my eldest daughter and youngest sister, have my mother's name in scrolled letters tattooed against their skin. My sister and I have given each of our daughters this name as a middle, Elizabeth. Maybe Dad had to pawn the flute after Mom died, my sister wonders through the radio waves of our voices. He had to pawn the sapphire wedding rings. This memory remains a finely etched scar for my sister. My stepfather didn't know how to live or parent with my mother. After her death, my sister, the youngest at 15, with her deep loss pushing at shadows In the dark, she feared, was sent to live with a beloved family friend in Portland, Oregon. My sister slept in the same room, part bedroom and part art room, with our mother until she was 14. My sister insists she moved from my mother's bed onto her own mattress in the same room at age 13. She laughs and admits that Mom breastfed her until she was 4. This isn't something I tell everyone, she says. People think it's crazy when you breastfeed your children. We speak of the years we breastfed each of our children. I see a flash of my teenage self, my body at KA Beach, sun-filled and curled hair. Some guys trying to pick me up, talking about oil on my skin and the curve of my back and how my body is the same as before. He's a friend of my father's. My mother is friends with his wife. His wife was with my mother in Humboldt, California, and knows my biological father. At times, I'll hear him mention my father's name in passing, Damon. I know she catches shadows of memories of the life they all knew in those California mountains. The man touches my leg as I watch my daughter playing at the edge of the water. Me and my small red bikini, semi-confidence, I watch this me. My eldest climbs on my lap, pushing aside my top. She nurses. I don't know the words to tell this man I'm leaving. My daughter needs a nap, I say, or want to say. Does he leave? Maybe I watch his fading back. Maybe the smell of his skin remains and he walks toward the path of KA, toward the small one-bedroom house I lived in with my mother, brother, and sister, and Kat before Mom married stepdad, always dad. Maybe I follow far enough behind this man, knowing I will tell my mother about his hands and eyes, the discomfort. But I carry the stories of 3 children being fed from my body, at least 2 years each. I carry stories of how long my mother breastfed each of her children. My brother drank goat's milk, didn't thrive on Mom's breast. These are her words. She said he smelled like a baby goat. My mother's voice tells me, I breastfed you until 2 1/4. You were such an independent child, but I fed you until you were 2 1/4. The quarter in my feeding has a ring of music written around its edges. My sister Lita, the child of solemn eyes and running nose, this story slips away from me, but I have a photo in black and white of my sister nursing. We were escaping Damon when my sister was a baby. I worry for my sister's memories of softness. We were hiding and taking planes. We were living in camper vans, teepees, and tents on beaches, homeless. I hear my mother say that she worries for Lita. She worries. I worry. She still worries. This worry, like time, is not linear. I just want her to find happiness, my mother's voice says. Our brother, who lives in our house in Ocean View, near the gravel road, lava before the winds, in Naalehu, thinks on my flute question. He lives in Mom and Dad's old house. He texts me pictures of his puppies. He works towards a response for my flute question. It's going to be a rough Christmas. If you have any love, he says. A pause. Then another text lights my screen. Maybe Dad gave the flute to the neighbors up the hill. My brother says he feels Dad time. He'll tell me that Dad's still watching out for him. When he is low, he tells me he'll see Dad soon. When it's cold in Ocean View, he'll text me about how cold can hurt at times. The family, the siblings, we listen and we love, but we don't have the words to heal the pain of heroin. We love, we pay his phone bill, and we say that he, Mooney, was Dad's golden child. I know Dad is with him in some form up in Ocean View with the Ohia Lehua. I gathered with the Ohia. It is my dad's voice in jazz tones, a call for rain. Our small wood-brown house, more shack on the lot in Ocean View, are centered in the Ohia. The Ohia that are dying a rapid death, a fungus of black radial staining. If you run into the neighbors up the hill, can you ask? Mom woke me up asking about her flute, I say. My mother plays notes into my bones. I see her fingers pressing gentle like the black spot holes. You need to wake up, she says, as I sleep in the early morning wakeful state. 21 years after her death, and I still see my mother's face appearing around the bend of a doorway. Wakey, wakey, rise and shine. Then I forget how beautiful you are with your morning face, she says. These are the words mothers tell their children. I've paused and held these same words when I see my daughter's sleep-filled faces. In the memory of my mother's voice, I am wrapped around my sleeping daughter, my eldest, our young bodies woven, my breasts lined with blue and faded spiders of scars, a map of our mother-daughter language of expanding skin and body-warm milk. My mother and I had said I had rich milk, cream on the top. In this memory, my oldest daughter is still all sun-brushed curls and sleeping limbs. She is still a child in the light-caught dream. Okay, I think I'll take questions now.
I don't know if this is personal, but do your daughters have children?
No, they don't want children. I have grand puppies and a grand chicken. Any other questions?
Just in terms of organization, because I know this is kind of almost pure creativity in some ways. How did it all come together that you realized this was going to be a book, not just a bunch of scattered ideas?
I think it was always going to be a book in my mind. And I really like this idea of hybrid work. I mean, too often we're put in kind of these genre categories, but I'm always thinking, how can poetry and prose speak to each other? And it's almost like music. And my dad was a jazz musician, and he came from Black Bottom, Detroit. This is my stepdad, not my biological father. And when he'd speak, I would hear music in his voice, right? And when I'm writing, I'm thinking, if my writing were a song, how could I bring all the instruments and the lyrics and that kind of rhythm and beat kind of to life in my writing? And how could poetry kind of be that interjection, that kind of moment when you're listening to jazz, perhaps, and it seems like the musician is going off on this wild tangent, but they still have control. So the poetry, again, is kind of like that moment where I think it's breaking any kind of stasis. And when I was writing it, I was thinking the poetry is kind of enacting or embodying the movement of escape, too. So it was purposeful kind of to work with these. As far as like putting them into a specific order, I did change it around. At first, this book was called Everything Turns to Light, because my mother used to tell us to surround ourselves with light for protection. And I read this news article, this is probably about 4 years ago, where this young tourist boy almost got swept out to sea. And the mother was all, in that moment, everything turned to light. And I understood what she was saying. She was saying, it's like those moments where you almost lose your children. It's so blinding, right? You can't think of anything else. Does that answer your question, kind of?
Yes, it does.
Other questions?
Has it been difficult writing about these hard experiences?
It's very difficult, and I actually studied, I pulled essays from like Van der Kolk and Ruth Lees and studied trauma. And a lot of what they were saying is that when people have undergone trauma, they can't always remember. But I pushed back against that a little bit and thought they can remember when they're ready, and they can write when they're ready too. And that writing can be healing, because humans kind of naturally want to do that kind of autobiographical work, like put stories in orders to make sense of their life. But writing about trauma is very difficult. That's why it was important for me to have my daughter's permission. But again, I see it as a space of healing for all of us. And they read it before my publishers published it and gave me the okay. And that's kind of that contract between us. that these stories are important. Like talking about mental health is important. Talking about women's experiences are important.
As one of as before someone, I think my professors mentioned that this was like nonfiction, but not. What type of genre would you like say the story is?
So it's under that kind of wonderful umbrella of life writing. And under life writing, we have autobiography, biography, and creative nonfiction. So they're true stories. And I'm making that pact with my reader and saying these are my true lived experiences. But I want you to remember that that word creative is there. So even though they're true stories, we're remembering creativity as humans. That's part of who we are too, even when we write. So I'm saying this is my true story, but I'm going to bring my creative self to it, to this work too.
So will we be analyzing this in class?
We're not going to analyze this in our class.
Did you find it rewarding accomplishing these stories? Because like for me, when I got through trauma, I was really grateful about the outcome of my life, my situation.
Mm-hmm.
And did you feel the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel very grateful, and I think the language in this book is talking about that too, about being able to leave and being able to tell my daughters, we left and you're safe, right? And not everybody does, but everybody can. My mother did it for me and my siblings, and I did it for my daughters, leaving that place that wasn't safe for them. But really, this book is about the inheritance of trauma too, because I thought as long as I love them enough and as long as I keep them safe, all the abuse around them won't affect them, but it did. And it showed itself in these terrible ways, anorexia and anxiety and attempted suicide. And, but again, we weren't going to hide from it. We were going to talk about it. And it's only with their kind of love and permission that I'm here talking about them. But what I did was I didn't put their names into the book. So I only list them as my eldest, middle, and youngest daughter for some kind of anonymity to kind of give them that space too. But it is, all of the stories are a love language between me and my daughters and me and my mother and me and my grandmothers. So it is, that is what it's centered on. Other questions?
Do you have any advice for people who want to write about their own trauma or their experience, but at the same time either feel embarrassed or ashamed to let that out in the open and have either people they know or people they're close to know about like your inner deep thoughts?
Yeah. I would say you write the stories that you need to write. You're going to feel vulnerable, so don't write the ones that make you feel too vulnerable. You can change the names of people in the stories, but if you have living family members that this might hurt, you as writer are going to have to kind of navigate those boundaries. What do you feel comfortable with? And again, the only reason I feel comfortable with these stories is because my daughters gave me permission, because they see it as healing too. And one thing that I name my biological father in this, and he was abusive to my mother, but I don't name their father because it's not his story, it's our story. So there are these small acts that you can do to protect yourself. You could do it in small increments. See how it feels to write the story, and then maybe share it in a space that you feel comfortable with. And I can say that I'm ever, ever, ever so grateful for my writing community that I first found at UH Manoa, and that I continue to be in awe of as they kind of lift me up and support me as I write, and I hope to give back to my communities. That's why it's so nice to see all of you here, because I can tell you as a writer that having community and having readers is essential. Okay, I think I saw a question back there.
How are your daughters doing today?
They're good. They are grown now, and I think that being able to talk about these stories and never let them like live in darkness or shame was essential. But there are boundaries that I have with each of my daughters that I won't write about, because some things are just their stories. So again, it's this kind of act or language between us. What are you comfortable with me talking about? Because I don't think mental health should ever be stigmatized. I think we need to talk about it, because a lot of people struggle with it. And I don't think that I should be ashamed that I was a victim of domestic violence, but women often are. So again, some of the work I had to do was talk through some of the things that I felt I was responsible and apologize to them, like keeping them too long. And it was up to them how they responded to that kind of language between us.
Do you see yourself writing a follow-on book or a poem about life today now that you're past that?
I finished my second book. It's called Back into Our Bodies. And it's actually about what it means to be a woman and aging. But it's also about being a woman and a lot of the violence I see towards women and men. It's kind of that structure that keeps us in harm. And again, I'm looking at how we can embody, our stories, but also how the body can be really powerful. But women are told that they will disappear at a certain age and become invisible, right? So I'm interested in that. And I finished it. Like I said, it's called the Back into Our Bodies. And it's a little rage-filled, but I like rage. I like this idea that rage can be this kind of beautiful act of love too, when you're a woman and you're saying that this is my body, right? So thank you for that. Anybody else?
So follow kind of on the two questions about your stories. Do you write all of the stories and it's just some of them become public and some of them are just for you? Because you mentioned there's some stories where you don't necessarily want to share them, but you still kind of, because it's sometimes as a writer we don't really have a choice what we write.
Mm-hmm.
So do you still kind of explore these ideas even if you know you're never going to put them out into the world?
I had this file that was called something like the sorrow, and had a really dramatic name. It was like the anger and sorrow of everything, and I put things in there. And what I did was I pulled lines from it that I could use, but there are moments I put just lots of junk down that I just need to write. And I wish I could remember the title of the folder. I was being dramatic, but it felt kind of good to be dramatic in that moment. But I did pull things that I could write about from that folder. But yeah, I definitely have a folder that's just about kind of vomiting up bad feelings. And that doesn't necessarily have to go out into the world, I don't think. Other questions? I think we're done, so I can turn the floor over to you. Thank you so much.